Hello, my name is Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL graduates, and welcome back to our first video of FPL in the 23-24 season. The game launch is just around the corner, and we've had the first day of price reveals. Exciting times, right, Josh?
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely epic. There's going to be loads of content on our YouTube channel this season. We're ramping it up and we mean it. And it's going to be really good. I can't wait to get into these prices. There's been so many high, low ones, so much discussion. It's going to be great. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the first price reveal that we had today was Martin Odegaard at 8.5 million. So it's a bit of an increase from last season, but his output last season was really, really good. He scored 15 goals last year, didn't he? Josh, what's your initial sort of gut reaction thoughts to the pricing of Odegaard? Is he priced fairly, or do you think there's sort of, a little bit unfairly put up?
I think it's definitely warranted. Like we said, he's gone up 2 million from his start price last season, and obviously that is because Arsenal played a lot better than what we expected last season, and because he scored so many goals and got so many assists. Although I do think this season he might have a more reverse role almost, like with Kai Havertz coming into the team. I think he's going to be more of the attacking midfielder. Obviously, we have to wait and see for that. We don't know how Arsenal will play under Arteta yet with all these new additions that they're bringing in. So it will be interesting. 8.5 million. I'll be shocked if Martinelli is more than that. I think Martinelli should come in at 8.5 as well, and then Saka be a little bit more because he's on penalties and stuff. But yeah, I think it's a fair price. I don't know about you, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair. Although I think out of all the Arsenal options that we're looking for going forwards, it's a bit surprising to say, but I'm thinking I'm leaning more towards the other potential options at Arsenal. Again, it's very dependent on the price, but it's a fair enough price, and he's definitely going to be an option throughout the season. I think we're going to be looking at having at least one of these 8.5 million midfielders in our squads, and Odegaard's definitely going to be in consideration to be in there at sort of the points where Arsenal have those good fixtures in the season.
Yeah, and moving on to another 8.5 million midfielder. And this one took me by surprise, to be honest. I didn't expect Bruno Fernandes to drop down to 8.5 million. He actually scored more points last season than he did the season before. Obviously, he's coming down. He was at 12 million, I think, the season before that. Then he's come down to 10, and now he's down to 8.5. 176 points last season for Bruno, though. I didn't expect this to be that much of a decrease. I think 9 million would 9.5 million may be fair. 8.5 million for me, it's going to take a lot for me not to have him in my game week 1 team because of how cheap he is. He's on penalties. Mason Mount's in that midfield too, which gives him more, access to just run around and stuff like that. I just think it's just a no-brainer. I don't know about you, Ben.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I saw Bruno at 8.5. I was expecting him between 9 and 9.5 million. And all of a sudden, we've gained 0.5 in almost unexpected value for our teams. I think Bruno is going to provide some really good value this season. Man United, they didn't get too many penalties last year, but it's Man United. That won't happen 2 years in a row. So, yeah, I think all round, he is a great asset to have. I imagine he's probably going to be the most popular Manchester United asset because I can see someone like Rashford being priced similar, if not even more than Bruno Fernandes, just based on how many people had him in their teams last year. So I think he's almost too cheap to ignore right now. We'll see what everyone else is priced at Manchester United. But for now, that is a good bargain. Okay, so next up, we've got another really fairly priced player. I don't know what Josh thinks, but he is nodding his head, so that's always a good sign. Mitoma at 6.5 million for Brighton. Remember, he started off last season at just 5 million. He was really, really cheap. He's gone up to 6.5 million. And wow, this could be another bargain to be had here on FPL.
Yeah, I thought he'd be coming in at least 7. So it's interesting that he's coming at 0.5 cheaper, similar to the Bruno pricing, I guess you could say. I think one thing with Mitoma, I think towards the back end of the season, the attack and returns dried up a little bit. So maybe that's why they didn't push him on to 7.5 million category. And another thing as well is that when you look at the other players who are at 6.5 million, you can understand why he's around that sort of price because those guys as well maybe could be considered underpriced as well. So yeah, we'll wait and see. But I think Mitoma at 6.5 again could be a lock in most teams. I do believe Brighton have quite a good start to the season as well in terms of fixtures. So yeah, again, really, really nice option to kick things off. Moving into a forward though, Ollie Watkins, 8 million. I think again is quite a fair price. He's been scoring a lot of goals, especially under Unai Emery. I think a lot of these Villa assets, it'll be interesting to see where they're priced, because last season they did do really well. Obviously, they've just signed Pau Torres, so that might cause a bit of controversy in defence in terms of like Tyrone Mings last season. For me, he was unbelievable value at 4.5 million. What's your thoughts on Ollie Watkins, though, Ben? Do you think this is a fair price?
Yeah, I think it's fair, but I think managers will be hesitant to bring him in
Yeah.
just because he is that little bit more expensive than he was last year. And as we've seen, there are a few expensive players in FPL this season. There are, of course, bargains in there too, which offset it. So it puts Ollie Watkins in that weird sort of middle ground of if you're bringing him in, you're making sacrifices in your midfield and your defense. So it's weighing those options up. I think definitely an option. And if Villa kick off the season like they did last year, it won't be long before he's getting up and creeping up to 8.5, which is where it does get quite expensive. But for me, for now, it's almost a wait and see. Let's see how Villa do to start the season and make sort of adjustments based on that. It could very well be that, you know, you have a different striker in and you're going to want to move him on to Watkins because he is a player that thrives off form, especially under Emery. Okay, so next up, we've got Cliver of Bournemouth, priced at 5 million. It's an interesting price for an unknown quantity. We remember last season, there was a lot of hype around the £5 and £5.5 million midfielders. And based on Cliver's price, I feel like yet again, we're going to get a lot of hype surrounding that fifth midfielder choice. 5 million, 4.5. We're going to see a few of them again, I feel, this year. And Clivert's an interesting pick. Whether he's going to be a template pick, I don't think so. We're going to have to see how he fits into this Bournemouth system. Obviously, they've got a new manager, a new direction, so he could become a focal point for that Bournemouth team. Josh, what are your thoughts on Cliver? Is he an option already, or are you going to wait and see how he performs?
I'll probably be waiting and seeing. I think he scored 6 goals in La Liga last season for Valencia. So, you know, not too bad returns from there. But yeah, like you said, 5 million is a very unknown quantity. I think Bournemouth in general, very unknown under that new manager. I don't think anyone really knows how they're going to set up or anything like that. So yeah, I'll be waiting and seeing. But like you said, in that 5 and 5.5 million price point, there'll be a lot of people looking at that because a lot of the players, as we'll come on to, do cost a lot of money. So you're going to need someone like a Cliver to just sort of fix the budget around, because otherwise you're going to be way over budget. Moving on to our next player is going to be Nkunku. Obviously, another new signing to the Premier League this season. 7.5 million. He's classified as a forward. A lot of people had their hopes up who play Champions League fantasy that he might be a midfielder, but we do know that he's been playing forward for Leipzig pretty much all season last year. So I think the forward classification is very fair. 7.5 million as well, though, is also a very fair price. I know we've seen so many of these great attackers come to the Bundesliga, or come from the Bundesliga, should I say, and not really hit the ground running. I have a funny feeling that this is not going to be the case with Nkunku. I just think his style of play really suits the Premier League. Obviously, it's very unknown with Chelsea as well, similar to the Bournemouth situation. New manager, not sure who's going to be playing, etc., etc. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, for me at the moment, I'm probably not going to look towards Nkunku for my game week 1 team. I think if he was priced as a midfielder, and I don't necessarily think he's going to be playing sort of as the number 9 striker for Chelsea in the system, we'll wait and see with that. But if he was a midfielder, I think FPL managers would have a much bigger choice to make because it becomes so much more valuable as an asset. So for now, it's probably not looking like that I will probably have him as an option for my team, but he's priced fairly enough that if you wanted to, you could bring him in. So I don't have a problem with the price. It's just the forward midfielder. That's where the debate lies. Okay, so we've talked about a forward not moving to midfield. Let's talk about a forward who was there last year, who's now a midfielder. And Mbeumo of Brentford has moved down to a midfielder, and at 6.5 million, this one, again, could be really good value. No Ivan Toney, as we know. And Mbeumo could take the mantle of penalty taker at Brentford, the main striker potentially at Brentford as well. Things could get really interesting with him. Josh, what are your thoughts? Do you think Thomas Frank will start with him as the main striker, or will they go for Schade up top? What's the general consensus with Mbeumo?
Yeah, I think it's an unbelievable pick to start the season off. You know, like you said, no Tony. I'd say between Mbeumo and Visser, they probably share that sort of striker spot. in that Brentford team, like we saw towards the back end of the season a little bit. So, you know, a midfielder out of position, playing up top, 6.5 million, could be on penalties. There's not a lot not to like. Obviously, Brentford could still acquire a new forwards in the time, which I think they probably will, because they'd be silly not to. But yeah, I think it's a really, really nice option, and potentially could be a lock-in in most teams, because Brentford, you know, they do play well against pretty much any opposition. We saw that they had like the best top six record out of anyone outside the top six last season. So it's really, really interesting. And I thought it came as a shock, really, to see him as a midfielder, because obviously everyone knew that Tony would be banned for half the season. So yeah, it's interesting. What's your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, he ended the season in such good form, which obviously bodes well for FPL managers. And we've obviously, you know, if he didn't end the season in such good form, there may not be as many people interested in him. But like you say, we've seen him perform exceptionally well. I remember his haul against Spurs was ridiculous. So I do think this guy provides insane value and can produce potentially bigger hauls than he did last year. It's a shame, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with Tony, but that's so far down the line that Mbeumo should be safe in his minutes as well.
Okay, so moving on to another 6.5 midfielder. I mentioned this earlier, that there's a few options at this price range, which is really good, because then you can sort of rotate them around the fixtures, which is perfect. It is Eze, Crystal Palace's main man now. Obviously, Zaha is leaving potentially in free agency. So yeah, Eze, the main man, 6.5 million, England international now. I think this is a very, very fair price for him. We saw towards the back end of last season, maybe the last 10 game weeks, he just kept on popping up with like these double-digit hauls. I remember the game against Southampton in particular, where he got that 14-pointer, I do believe. So really good player, really high ceiling on set pieces and things like that. There's no Elise either, so there's even more set pieces to go around at Palace for the start of the season. But I think the main issue is maybe with Palace is like, where are these goals going to come from? Because they have lost Zaha, they have no Michael Elise. So I think they do need to recruit this summer. So we'll wait and see how they get on in pre-season and stuff like that. But what's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I like him as an asset over potentially the season. In the short term, I'm sort of thinking, look, he's going to be the main man, yes, but the output of Palace is going to go down significantly with a couple of those big players that are going to be missing. So I'm in two minds about it. But you know what? Like at 6.5 million, he will be so easy that if you have him in your game week one team and it's not looking like Palace are performing, he's going to be an easy one to transfer out and bring in whoever's going to be performing at 6.5 million. There's going to be one of these 6.5s that absolutely pops off at the start of the season. So it'll be easy to move him on someone else if needed. So the risk is lesser with someone like Eze, but I do think he's going to be a fantastic asset nonetheless. Okay, so we have got our first goalkeeper price reveal of the season, and it is Leno of Fulham at 4.5 million. I think he does provide good value for money. He was sort of an underrated asset last season, I believe, with some of the saves he was making. He's picking up a few bonus points here and there as well. Josh, what are your thoughts on Leno? Is he one that's going to provide FPL managers with some good value?
Yeah, I think Fulham in general sort of went under the radar defensively last season. I think Leno was the 6th highest scoring goalkeeper, which at his price is really, really respectful. So yeah, I think it's a decent option, but seeing there's been other goalkeepers released at the same sort of price point. It'll be interesting to see if we can maybe get a fixture rotation of 2 4.5s, or whether, you know, if there's some 5 million goalkeepers that sort of take our fancy in the top 6. It'll be really interesting to see. But yeah, I don't think it'll be that easy to decide a goalkeeper this season, because I believe like the likes of Newcastle with like Nick Pope, I expect him to be priced at maybe 5.5 million after seeing Trippier's price reveal, which we'll come on to in a moment. So it's really interesting sort of price point, but I think he could be in a lot of teams come game week 1, Leno. And then moving on to another goalkeeper price reveal, it is Jordan Pickford. I sort of alluded to the other 4.5 million price reveals, and he is one of them. Obviously, under Sean Dyche, now Everton, I believe they'll become a lot more defensively solid after a pre-season with Sean Dyche. I think, you know, that's one of the key things that we saw with him at Burnley, is when he had a pre-season, his teams tend to play a lot better. So Jordan Pickford, 4.5 million. Obviously, there's been rumours around him potentially leaving Everton. I don't think that will necessarily happen, but it's a very nice price for him in an Everton team with, to be honest, quite a strong defence. Like the defenders that they have at Everton are quite good. I just think they just need a bit of gelling together and working on that sort of shape, which they'll do in pre-season. So he is quite high in my shopping list. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to provide some good value for managers again. A lot of save point potential because Everton did at the back end of last season, especially concede shots, but they didn't concede too many goals in the end. And Pickford is a main part of that defense. He will pick up bonus points. He's good with his feet. Yeah, I don't see any issues at all with Pickford at 4.5 million. I think it's great value. But I also think managers are going to have quite a big decision to make because I think there are going to be a few more 4.5 million keepers that really sort of, you got to pick well and pick two keepers that rotate well here. As it stands, based on these prices, we could see a lot of really decent 4.5 million options. Okay, so next up, we've got Lucas Paqueta from West Ham United at 6 million. He's priced, I believe, at the same price that he was last year. He didn't pick up sort of loads of points last season, but this season, 6 million, I feel like after a season in the Premier League, he could really kick on and do something great for West Ham. They've got Europe as well. Have to bear that in mind. But after a full season in England, he's looked decent in parts. It's just that final sort of consistency, maybe, with Paqueta. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. He was West Ham's third highest scorer last season, only after Bowen and Benrahma. And those two players, I'll be interested to see how they're priced. Because I feel like I can't see Bowen coming in at an 8.5, 8 million when you've got the likes of Odegaard and Bruno at that price. But I think Benrahma's the most interesting one because he's on penalty duty and he was priced at about the same price, 6.5 million last season. I think he would be the go-to asset for West Ham for me personally. With Paqueta, it's like you said, there's just no consistency there really, and obviously West Ham potentially losing Declan Rice, that's going to have a huge impact on how they play going forward as well. So yeah, for me, I'd probably hold off. It wouldn't be a game week one pick, but I think West Ham going forward, they do have some really, really nice assets that we can look towards going ahead. Moving on to the next price reveal, and I did allude to him earlier, it's Kieran Trippier, 6.5 million, a real big increase. I think he started at 5 million, if I'm not wrong, last season, but we know how good that Newcastle defence was. It sort of would be interesting to see how the other Newcastle defenders are priced, because I feel like I'd be quite shocked if they aren't priced at like 5.5 million and above, given that he is 6.5 million, the same price as some other real premium defenders of years gone by that we'll come on to later as well. What's your thoughts on it? Because obviously he was the top scoring defender last year, nearly broke the record in terms of points for defenders. So I'd say it's really well justified, but it's just a bit of a shock because I feel like I'm not ready to pay 6.5 million for a Newcastle United defender just yet, Ben.
Yeah, I think obviously last season, no Champions League helped them with that. And yes, it's a justified price, but I don't think as many managers are going to be willing to pay that price for Kieran Trippier this year. 6.5 is a lot. There are some good defenders that you can get at that price and even lower. So with the amount of sort of players that are a little bit more expensive in the rest of the team, I think Trippier may be slightly overlooked this season, which is a shame because he was so fantastic for all of us last year. It's just that little bit much for managers to go, oh, is it really worth it? But it's a big decision for FPL managers to make, which is what we asked for from FPL. So it's only a good thing that he's priced at that, but I just don't think as many managers are going to sort of go for a 6.5 million Newcastle defender. Okay, so next up, we've got Jose Sarr of Wolves, priced at 5 million. Now, for me, this was the first one that I thought was a little bit strange in terms of pricing. You had Pickford and Leno at 4.5, who were arguably as good, if not better, than Sarr last year. And Sarr's priced at 5 million this year. So for me, 0.5 overpriced. I don't know what you think, Josh.
Yeah, exactly that. I think, Wolves have that stigma of being this defensively solid team, whereas I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore now under Lopetegui. I think he's made them more free-flowing, which makes them, concede a lot more chances. So yeah, for me, definitely 0.5 overpriced. I don't think anyone will really go near him unless Wolves have this resurgence. I think Wolves are one of the favourites to go down potentially as well this season, losing some key players like João Moutinho, Ruben Neves. So yeah, for me, it's a no-go. I'd stay well clear of him unless we see Wolves just pull some absolute madness out of the hat. Moving on to the next price reveal, and it's a huge one as well. It's Heung-min Son at £9 million. Obviously, last season, it just wasn't his year. After a Golden Boot campaign, we thought, this is maybe another great season for him. Spurs and Son in general just didn't really hit the heights that they did the season prior. And yeah, I think it's a well-deserved price reduction, but it also means that next season, under a new manager, potentially new tactics, it could see a resurgence in Son and could see him become the premium asset that we know that he has been.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really difficult one, in my opinion, to price because he really just almost fell off a cliff in terms of his form last year. I think they've priced him just about right at 9 million. We know the quality that he possesses. He is a fantastic player on his day. So we have to be aware that at any given moment, he can just go into form like that. And again, he's a player that scores all of his goals in a very short period of time. So I expect Son to become sort of must have in this, in a period of probably about 10 game weeks this season where he's going to score all of his goals. So yeah, 9 million, it's a fair price. I don't think I will have him for my game week 1 team because there are so many well-priced assets around the same price he is, but there will be a period of time that everyone's going to own Son, I reckon, this season. Double game week, maybe. Let's see. Okay, so next up, we've got Morgan Gibbs-White from Nottingham Forest. He's priced at 6 million this season. And again, he was a player towards the end of the season that showed some really great form. He picked up loads and loads of returns and a surprising amount at that. He's come off the back of a decent season at Forest. Forest managed to stay up. Do we think, Josh, that they can continue what they started last season and sort of kick on and start getting up the league table?
Yeah, I think Forest are one of those teams that needed to survive the first season, and it will make them become a better Premier League side going forwards. Gibbs-White had the same amount of returns as Bruno Fernandes last season, which is absolutely crazy. 17 returns in total, which sort of went under the radar because for me personally, I didn't own him at all last season. He picked up a lot of assists, Gibbs-White. I think he got 12 assists last season, which maybe is why it goes under the radar because obviously he's not scoring the goals, which would get him 5 points. For me, I think it's a fair price. I'd be more interested if he was at 5.5 million because I think that sort of price bracket leans in towards most teams probably more often. But yeah, I think he'll be a very good option. And obviously, Nottingham Forest potentially recruiting more attackers like Iheanacho that has been rumoured to join in Forest. So yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting pick. And I think Forest in general could be quite interesting going forward next year. Moving on to the first Burnley price reveal that we've had so far, and it's Benson, 5.5 million at Burnley. Watched him a brief bit last year in the Championship, and he's a really exciting player to watch. I think Burnley are a really exciting team in terms of FPL because under Company, you feel like they're going to have to, score goals to stay up. And they have a lot of players who can score goals. And he is one of them. Really, really tricky, exciting player. Really good on the eye, which will get a lot of people interested in him, I think, Ben. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a midfielder priced at probably 5.5 to 5 million anyway. And I think it's a really exciting pick at a really exciting price for FPL managers. They've clearly learned from Matoma and not priced him at 5 million this year. But look, Burnley was so good last year that I think at some point in the season, even at the start, it might be worth just having one of those Burnley players, even if it's sort of your fifth midfielder, potentially rotating off the bench of one of your defenders. It might be worth bringing one of these guys in because they are priced very cheaply. And I think they can cause a lot of teams some serious problems in the Premier League this season. Okay, so we're going to go to another promoted team. Carlton Morris of Luton Town is priced at 5.5 million as a forward this year. One of the cheaper options that we've got that does started a lot of games for Luton Town last year. I think it's a good value pick, but I'm not sure, how many goals he's really going to score. It's going to be potentially a good bench player to have first on the bench. But for me, I'm not entirely sure whether, he's going to be in my FPL plans this year. Josh, what are you thinking? Are you thinking similar, or are you thinking there's some potential for him to play a part in your FPL season this year?
Yeah, I'm a bit more optimistic than your pessimism that you were bringing along. You know, he scored over 20 goals in the Championship last season. Luton's top scorer. I think if Luton are going to score, it's going to be through him. So, you know, if Luton do go through a patch of maybe some good form or good fixtures, he could be a good guy to get. 5.5 million. I think they've priced the promoted assets a lot better this year than they did last year. Obviously, I think Mitrovic came in, obviously more well known than Morris, but he came in at like 6.5 million last year. Solanke 6 million. So it's nice to know that like these guys are priced at a price where you're more inclined to maybe go and get them for the extra million than some bench fodder that you can probably go get. So yeah, I'm not saying I'd have him game week 1, but I think, you know, the price opens it up to maybe having these kind of guys during a period of the season. And another promoted forward price reveal here with Sheffield United and Dye, 5.5 million as well. Again, a really exciting player last season in the Championship. Not necessarily just a goal scorer, can create chances too for Sheffield United. It'll be interesting to see how they play. Obviously, had quite a couple of loan players play for them last season, so whether they can replace those with like-for-like players as well will be interesting to see. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think he could be an exciting player. Almost sort of as on the fence I was with Morris in terms of the fact that I'm unsure about how sort of he's gonna fit into my team potentially. But at 5.5 million, he's definitely sort of cheap enough to take that risk if needed. And for a playing striker, you can't really complain too much at the price there. 5.5, it's fair enough and cheap enough for you to go, you know what, you could take that punt if you wanted to. Okay, so the next player is a big one. It is Erling Haaland of Manchester City, and he is priced at 14 million this season. The most expensive player I think we're going to have this year. Wow, I wasn't expecting for them to go to 14. I was maybe thinking 13.5, but maybe that's me being an optimist in that. 14 million, I still think, regardless, is, you know, cheap for Erling Haaland, really. The amount of goals that he produced last season was ridiculous in the best team in the league. So I don't know about you, but for me, it's a no-brainer. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, it's an absolute no-brainer. I think we thought at the start of last season he'd be rotated a lot more than what he was. You know, we saw Pep start him, but maybe sub him at 60 minutes, and by then he's already got a brace. You know what I mean? Like, he was absolutely crazy last year. I think the 14 million pound price tag is justified. There's only 3 other players that have been priced at that price, which is Thierry Henry, Ronaldo, and Van Persie. So I feel like he definitely does fit into that category. 14 million. He's going to be the first player in my team. Captaincy is such an important thing in FPL, and a lot of people overlook it and maybe just captain the player that they think is just going to do well. With Erling Haaland, you can almost guarantee that most weeks he's going to return, and that is just invaluable in FPL. So having that captaincy set pretty much every week is, yeah, so good, and that's why he'll be literally the first player on my team sheet. Moving on to the second premium, the second big man of the FPL price reveals is Mo Salah, and he has taken a price drop. Obviously, last season, Liverpool didn't really do too well at the start of the season, in the first half of the season, but the second half, they really picked it up, and we saw, you know, Mo Salah return to his ways. I think a price drop is valid because 12.5 million, I think, is the right price for him. He will also be probably, again, the second premium in my team if I can somehow fit all of these players into my team. But yeah, I think it's a good price. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, good price for a good player. Let's not forget how good Liverpool looked towards the end of the season, chasing that top 4. And Salah was at the forefront of it all. He hogs chances. He shoots. He's selfish, which is what you want in an FPL asset. And with the way Liverpool are setting up towards the end of the season and how I think they're going to set up going into next season, it's going to be a machine built to just funneling balls to Salah for him to score. You got Szoboszlai, I think I pronounced that right. You've got Trent, who both are really elite passers of the ball. For Salah, it's going to be almost a dream setup. Yeah, I can't wait to see how they play. And yeah, for me, I think I'm probably going to get Salah in especially at a lower price than he was last year. Okay, so we also had some teams reveal a few more players each today. So the ones that stand out really is the £4 million defender Bell. He started 43 out of 46 games in the Championship last season. So he could be really a great option to have first on the bench. In terms of any other assets, we're probably not looking at any of these other guys, but Bell is definitely the guy that we're interested in. He's cheap enough for us to go, yeah, you know what? We might have to go for him as our first sub.
Yeah, and moving on to Sheffield United. Again, not too much to be talking about here. I'm going to absolutely butcher his name, but Ahmedovich, maybe? Absolutely not. 4.5 million defender. He got, I think, 6 goals and 2 assists last season, which is pretty decent numbers for a centre-back, obviously in the Championship, though. So they will take a toll in terms of his output going forward. I know a lot of people were hoping for Norwood to potentially be 4.5. He's at 5 million. So really frustrating prices, maybe. But obviously, this is not the full squad. So there could be some hidden gems in there. But yeah, not much to write home about with Sheffield United.
Okay, so again with Burnley, I think we were all hoping Brownhill was going to be 4.5 again. He is not this season. In terms of any other players that we're looking at, defenders maybe taking an interest, but we're not sure how well they're going to do clean sheets. Muric is a good keeper as well, so I do anticipate he could be somewhat of an asset for next season. If you're rotating as well with another keeper, definitely an option. But again, they've sort of teased it. There could be some hidden gems in there. We're hoping for some maybe more 4.5 mids and a £4 million defender in there that plays.
Okay, so moving on to Fulham, a non-promoted side, an actual Premier League side. Mitrovic to 7.5 million. I think that's justified price rise. He was banging in goals last season, a little bit cheaper than Ollie Watkins. So that 7.5 to £8 million price bracket is really interesting to look at. It'll be good to see who else is around there. Obviously, we've got Nkunku as well as some other players. Andreas Pereira, 5.5 million. Again, I think that's a really, really good price. Obviously, a 1 million increase on his 4.5 last season, but he's on set pieces. You know, he's been really dangerous. Obviously, just had an injury at the back end of last season, so hopefully that doesn't affect him too much. And even defenders, 4.5 million for Fulham defenders. We touched on it when speaking about Leno. A decent price for some decent defenders, Ben.
Yeah, not too bad at all. And I think there could be value in that. We've seen so far effectively 4.5 million defenders and keepers from Fulham. So that suggests to me that going to try and price these guys quite fairly. And yeah, Andreas as well, great price. Can't complain about that. He was so good last year. He got so many points that I think, you know, the price rise is justified. Mitrovic maybe just slightly too much for me to consider right now. But again, if he hits form, that could easily change. So yeah, no complaints at all with these Fulham prices. And next, we have got the Liverpool price reveals. Now, these are really, really interesting. Trent Alexander-Arnold is the standout guy to go for first. A lot of managers were looking at him at 7.5 million potentially and going, yeah, he's a lock-in. He's 8 million, so 0.5 more. And managers are sort of already going, oh, should I get him in? I think he's going to be worth every single penny that he is at 8 million. Darwin has taken a price decrease, 7.5 million. I think if Liverpool start firing, you're going to be struggling to sort of work out which free assets you want because they are priced relatively fairly this season. Robertson is 1.5 million cheaper than Trent Alexander-Arnold, which is a lot of money. There could be some managers there that are looking to save a little bit of money. Robertson's not a bad shout. Let's see how they set up. If they set up in that same system as the back end of last season, Robertson at 6.5 is just slightly too expensive, in my opinion. And then McAllister at 6 million, not a bad price at all for him. We know he's not going to get as many attacking returns potentially in this Liverpool side as the Brighton side. He may end up sitting a little bit deeper. He may also not be on penalties because of Salah. But you never know. At 6 million, if he starts getting the penalties because Salah missed a couple last season, if he starts playing a little bit more forward than we anticipate he's going to, then he could be one of the best priced players in the game. Josh, what are your thoughts on these Liverpool assets?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the Trent price reveal, because everyone had him at 7.5 and just that 0.5 more, it seems like everyone's not going to have him now, which I think is a bit ludicrous because he is by far the best defender we've had on FPL for like probably 4 or 5 years now. He's been unbelievable. And I think the 8 million price is definitely justified alongside, you know, the prices that we've seen. Like you alluded to with the system change with Liverpool, I think 6.5 million is way too much for Robbo if they still play that system. You know, if he's getting forward a lot more, then definitely 6.5 million is a steal. It'll be interesting to see what price Van Dijk's at, given that Robbo's at 6.5. I'd expect Van Dijk to go down to 6 if that was the case. So we'll wait and see for that. Darwin Nunez, 7.5 million. I alluded to it earlier with Nkunku, obviously Mitrovic as well. A plethora of strikers at that price. So, you know, if you go for one in your template, there's a lot of players. Say if Nunez, you go with Nunez and he doesn't go off, there's so many other strikers to maybe switch to and stuff like that. So I think that could be a definite way to go, depending on, you know, Harry Kane's price as well that we're yet to see. And like you said, with McAllister, 6 million, a very fair price. Just not going to be the same asset that we saw last year at Brighton, I don't think. You know, will play that. He's not going to be that Mac 10. He's going to be that Mac 8, that Mac 6 sort of role, I think. And yeah, penalties, I just don't see Mo Salah being taken off them because he's just been on them for so long. He's been so consistent for so long that I just don't think a couple of misses are really going to turn Klopp or Salah's nose away from that. So yeah, really good prices though, in fairness to FPL. I can't really complain. A lot of people moaning about players being too cheap, but then there's so many players that everyone's saying is too expensive. So, you know, you can't have it always. And I think so far so good for me in terms of the pricing, Ben.
Okay, so that rounds up all of the price reveals for day one on its own. There were loads and loads and loads of price reveals, and we're absolutely loving it.
Yeah, as I said just then, some really, really nice prices, and I'm excited to see more over the coming days. If you want to see when they get released and stuff like that and our opinions on them, make sure you check us out on Instagram as well, because that's where they go live straight away. Stay subscribed to the channel as well, because there's going to be so much FPL content coming this pre-season and throughout the season. It's going to be bigger and better than ever.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as usual, I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later.